Coming up next on Meet the Farmer TV. This program is a production of Meet the Farmer TV, LLC, in association with Planet Earth Diversified, Melly Productions, and Leslie P. Jenkins Photography and Graphic Design.
Now that we're understanding we're not a body separate from a mind, we're a body-mind. And we are, in fact, a body-mind spirit. Our spirit gives us strength, and it's not just that we have a heart beating. We have to say, what is your heart beating for? And the mind and body and spirit connection now are being appreciated in terms of health. And that's particularly true with something like taste, that we have to live a life worth living for, and that includes the senses, and the taste and color of food is very important for our digestion. We secrete more saliva. This assists in the digestive process. We are more attuned to when we've had enough. Fruit is naturally heavy, and so it will give a message to the stomach of enough. Whereas many of the refined foods, cookies, cakes, are light, and it'll take a lot more to give that heavy message that will then send a signal to the brain we've had enough.
On food, if you spend a little bit more money and you buy more healthy food, the benefits start to really accrue. And it actually should be something that people think about spending more money on when they can. It's interesting because the business schools are drawing still, even in 2010 after this big meltdown, these sort of brightest and most prestigious students, and what they're innovating, they're very innovative and very smart and intelligent. What they're innovating is the next sort of financial instrument, the next derivative, the next quote-unquote financial product that we saw in 2010. What they're really doing is spending all this energy and intellectual energy building this big house of cards that collapsed. And what we need to figure out is, as we both know from farming, there's a lot of intelligence and ingenuity that goes into farming. And if we could harness some of these smart young kids and get them out of Wall Street, they're basically spinning their wheels, making money, but not really producing anything, if we can divert at least some of them onto farms, imagine the new forms of sustainable farming that we could generate, the ingenious ways of recycling nutrients, of growing more food on less land, sustainably without chemicals. If those were the problems that we set for these kids, they would dazzle us with their solutions. Instead of the next credit default swap or credit default obligation that they're coming up with now.
All the rules are to benefit the large processors. They have nothing to do with the farmers that are selling locally. They're only going to get in the way. Who's going to enforce them? What are the penalties going to be? It's just denying you the right to produce your own food. It's absolutely ridiculous. The country's gone crazy in that whole respect anyway, all under the guise of safety. Where's the safety? It's the big guys who've got the bad food, not the little people. When was the last time somebody complained about food at a farmer's market? I don't think it's ever happened. Stuff is coming from other countries, but eventually they're going to run out of food for their own people too. What the heck? That's completely unsustainable. Food from other countries. Food from the other side of the country is unsustainable. Feed your neighbor. That's the way. Feed your neighbor. It's so sensible, because then whatever surplus goes out and the circle gets bigger and bigger, and we're not designed to feed the world. We're not designed to feed everywhere. We sell to our neighbors. We sell to our local people. Farmers have not been appreciated for the longest time. And we have a culture that thinks we're slaves to them.
So that's really the biggest thing, is to get the American public to appreciate the farmer.
If we got that whole issue would mushroom. We'd have people telling their congressmen, we need these farmers to be supported. And it wouldn't be just us farmers doing all the talking. The food safety bills, who was doing all the complaining? Us little farmers, probably. Because we could see what was going to happen. The rest of the people didn't really get an idea. They actually thought they're going to protect us. They're going to protect us.
Yeah. So we really kind of got four main things, and get the get the public to appreciate the farmers, maintain some diversity. Let's get the government out of we can regulate ourselves out of the problem mode, and really just kind of bring that local focus back around full circle to appreciating the farmer.
Yeah, I'd say those four. I'm glad you didn't say price, because that would come with it by automatic.
Yeah, you got to be
That'll all come.
competitive, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That's one of the reasons.
But people buy fancy cars as well as
That's right.
simple cars.
And
so.
people need a choice. And they can buy a cabbage or they can buy an heirloom tomato.
I would like to see a profusion of universities supporting sustainable agricultural colleges. And we need to provide scholarships for students who would like to go to these schools, ideally 4 years paid for free, so we can generate new generations of sustainable and organic farmers. We need to do this with the same type of energy that we put into our football and basketball teams and all of that other stuff that's non-essential. Food is essential, football is not.
I'm Michael Clark, your host for Meet the Farmer TV. Here we are at the Jefferson Scholars Foundation Hall at UVA, here in Charlottesville, Virginia, known as the locavore capital of the world, according to Forbes magazine. We're here for the second Virginia Food Security Summit. We're here with Deputy Secretary Kathleen Merrigan from the USDA. We've got experts, entrepreneurs, farmers, food people, everything to do with food security that affects us all. Now let's hear from Deputy Secretary Kathleen Merrigan from the USDA, accomplishments in advancing America's food system.
I'm really glad to be here to talk about what's happening in Virginia and how your efforts mesh with the larger goings-on across the country. As you launch Virginia's first statewide strategic food security plan this week, I'd like to give you an overview of USDA's priorities that are responding to America's complex and fast-changing food system. Perhaps first among several urgent issues is what's going on in rural America. Despite some high commodity prices and some farmers are doing well, the reality is not everyone's in that boat. Mid-sized farms are disappearing, and I'll be joined later here with Fred Kirschman on the panel, who's been really a great spokesperson, a wake-up call about the disappearing middle, the family farms that are just not making it in this economy. Elder Leopold warned about a spiritual danger of not owning a farm, believing that breakfast comes from a grocery. And I think now people are starting to take note of that. By 2011, over 85% of consumers polled by the National Groceries Association said they chose grocery stores based in part on whether they stock food from farms in the area. 85%. What does that mean for you in Virginia as you come up with your strategic plan to know that there is that surge of consumer interest? How do you tap into that? How do you really make that work for your local economy here? As Tanya has said in a recent UVA magazine, when Walmart says they're going to start sourcing some of their food locally, you know there's a trend. To truly advance America's food system, communities have to find a way to institutionalize infrastructure that means lasting change. That's your challenge, isn't it? That's what we're helping them to do, one region and one community at a time with different USDA investments. And we have to figure out how we sync up our funding and determine our priorities. We're supporting approaches like local meat processing, farm-to-school activities, and food hubs. A year ago, I visited the Jefferson Area Board on Aging and Adult Daycare Center here in Charlottesville. Nice visit there. JABA is showing us how you can really use locally grown food on a daily basis and improve the quality of nutrition for those participating in the daily meal delivery programs. And a key partner in this vision is a local food hub. I see my local food hub folk in the audience, which supplies JABA, schools, hospitals, restaurants, and the USDA cafeteria in Washington, D.C. with locally grown foods. It's more than just about sorting, storing, marketing, distributing. Vital as these services are, it's also about cultivating the next generation of farmers through education. And in just a few years, it's emerged as a model for fostering long-term sustainable development and community engagement through agriculture. Perhaps most important, it shows that local food can mean more than a farmer's market or farm stand, as important as those efforts are. The value chain for these products can be much, much more complex. Local Food Hub buys produce from more than 50 family farms within a 100-mile radius. Forgive me if my information is dated. I'll try to do my best. These aren't direct farm-to-consumer sales, but they fit the definition of a regional food system. In a country where the average farmer gets only 16 cents on the dollar spent at the grocery store, they need to capture the value of local work. They need access to restaurants and schools. Last spring, I announced the findings of a national survey of food hubs USDA conducted with the Wallace Center and the Project for Public Spaces. We identified over 100 food hubs that are operating across the country with average food hub sales of nearly 1 million annually. Each food hub, by our estimate, creates an average of 13 jobs. The median number of small and mid-sized suppliers served by an individual food hub is 40, creating economic opportunity for producers and communities. More than 40% of food hubs are specifically working in food deserts to increase access to fresh, healthy, and local products. And most exciting, over 40% of the food hubs that we surveyed were started by producers and other food entrepreneurs. While USDA has proudly offered support to nearly 30% of the nation's operating food hubs, we're even prouder to find that food hubs are trying hard to become economically self-sufficient and viable on their own. And some just sort of start and they don't even want USDA's help. They want to do it on their own. I'm just here to congratulate you on coming together on the second summit, understanding the real importance of this conversation, this dialogue you're having, and asking you to lift up the best ideas so that I can help champion what Virginia is doing across the country. Thank you very much.
Now let's hear from the roundtable discussion. What's likely, what's desired, and what's the future of our food security and our access to fresh, healthy food?
We have this incredible momentum of this local food movement. Where are we going? Where are we going to be? Is this a flash in the pan, or is this going to stay? And why? So first of all, people talk about a food system. It's important to understand, what are we talking about? I can't tell you how many people ask me, what is a food system? Well, it's all of the elements that go into getting the food from the farm to our mouths. And so that includes the people who grow it, who process it, who prepare it, who distribute it, who retail it, and who eat it. And it's all of that, but let's not forget who also dispose of it. So the cradle to compost. And so that's really what we're talking about when we talk about our food system. It's all of those components. And as we just learned, certain components of that food system are weaker in the local food system. Food security is accepted to be understood as ensuring several things. One is an adequate supply of nutritionally adequate and safe food. And the second piece is, can I get there? So we have the food, but can we get the food? So is it accessible? And then the third piece, is it affordable? So that when I get there and the food is there, can I actually afford it? And when people talk about food, the population, the people who are food insecure, they're talking about people who may not know where their meal is coming from in the next day, the next 3 to 5 days, or may not be able to afford it. This conference, this summit, is really about growing the local food movement. And does it have a future? And where are we going? And how can we make that future happen with this farm-to-table plan that we're launching tomorrow? And the reality is we're in a globalized system. We know there are some people who would say, well, we can eat all local. Well, it's pretty rare that there are people who can eat all local, and we know from people, authors like Mark Kurlansky, author of Salt and other wonderful food books like Cod, has noted that food trade has happened ever since people could move. We started trading salt thousands and thousands of years ago. Trade, it's in our blood. It's probably never going to stop, right? So in this globalized context where trade of food and spices and things we love and adore to eat is not going to stop, what does this localized food movement really mean? What does it mean? And that's really what we're here to talk about.
Locally grown food is going to be the salvation of our country. And that's not something that I say, I mean that in all seriousness, for a number of reasons. You know, the economy is in shambles. Everyone knows we need food. I think we all know that we need good food. The problem is that there's very little good food left, and there's fewer people producing good food. I am not a proponent of the major corporations, your ADMs and Monsanto, and a few others that we all know their names. I think that the challenge that we have in front of us is going to be something that we're going to have to really step up. I mean, we're watching this Occupy Wall Street movement, and I'm kind of curious to see if we might begin something like occupying supermarkets or different things like that in the not too distant future in order to really get the message out. Food is a serious thing. The global part of it is something that disturbs me because, you know, we can't fix all of the problems of the world, and we know that. You have to start close to home and do what you can locally. The first thing you need to do is we need to support your Virginia farmers. And they're advocating spend $10 buying something from a local Virginia farm. How many of you are currently doing that? That's great. Give yourself a round of applause. If the rest of you who aren't, it's time to start, because where are you going to get your food from in the next 20 years? If these small farms die out and the mega corporations are able to continue their takeover and annihilation of the small family farms, the genetic diversity, the biodiversity of our seeds, of our animals, and everything that we need to support human life as we know it on this planet Earth will disappear. Period. I mean, we're not playing, it will disappear, it'll be gone. You know, there used to be thousands of varieties of rice, we get down to a couple hundred, all the different livestock breeds that are being annihilated by the commercial people who are creating new things that aren't even real anymore. We all know 60 to 70% of the food we eat is genetically modified. You can read as much research as you want, but the bottom line is that the verdict is in, and it's not good for you.
Some folks in Sioux City, Iowa, who raise organic food managed to get a pretty nice connection with a Whole Foods store in Omaha. They had a very favorable buyer who started buying their stuff and putting a big display in the front door saying Iowa-grown organic asparagus. It was right when you came in. People started buying it, developing a lot of loyalty to it. And after 6 months of very successful sales, they got a call from the buyer one day who I think had changed, her boss had changed or something, and she said, well, we found a new supplier from Wisconsin. Can you come down $1 a pound on the asparagus price? This is sort of a typical moment a lot of farmers who try to sell the institutional markets often face. In this case, though, the farmers had the presence to say, no, we will not reduce the price. In fact, we'd like to make a deal with you. Would you be willing to keep our asparagus on this display for a week next to the stuff from Wisconsin? Let's see what happens. After a week, the store called up and said, we want your asparagus next week. Because they built so much loyalty with their customers, the customers said, we want to buy from local farms. We like the quality we're getting. We'd rather have Iowa asparagus than Wisconsin. That's, I think, how farmers are going to build that kind of personal loyalty, is how business relationships will form that allow us to flourish in the future. It's already happening, but we don't incentivize those connections the way we incentivize getting big.
So what we need to do is redesign agriculture and redesign it in a way so that we are both producing biodiversity and food, and so that we, in fact, can increase the ecosystem services that we not only need for food production, but also have a healthy planet with agriculture. And there are a lot of examples about that. They're mostly small examples, but throughout the planet where farmers are already beginning to do this. And there are also experiments that have been taking place, like at the Land Institute, in terms of perennializing annual crops, which again would, and the concept there is to have perennial polycultures. So again, to have a greater diversity, you would have better root systems which restore the biological health of soil. Farmers would have less expenses because they wouldn't have to plant the crop every year. They would plant it maybe every 5 or 6 years, so you have less energy input. Now, there's a lot of research that still needs to be done, but the progress that's been made over the last 30 years at this point looks pretty hopeful.
I think as we're able to continue the discussion about chronic disease prevention and food insecurity, a lot of the solutions are the same. I come from a public health perspective where we're looking to increase access to healthy foods to maintain a healthy weight, to make sure that your diet is rich in the nutrients that you need to prevent chronic diseases. But on the other hand, those same foods are diverse and grown locally here in Virginia. And so making that connection and that movement around not just preventing chronic disease and making sure that we're not just speaking a health language, but we're also speaking an access language and ways to alleviate the food deserts. Identifying those is a key component to working towards preventing and combating them. But I think a lot of times we forget to talk the same language and forget, who our partners in this fight really are. The Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act has expanded what we can do to address some of the food insecurity issues. And so I think we're at a great opportunity as people who are passionate about locally grown foods to begin to integrate into the steps that are being planned now with the Department of Education. The Department of Health oversees a wide variety of food assistance programs, and making sure that the message is heard that the emphasis needs to be placed on locally grown foods, since now you're able to purchase fruits and vegetables, and now you're able to purchase for meals rather than snacks. How can we coordinate those efforts and make sure that we're mutually working towards the same goals? Again, our language is different, but what we're working towards is very much the same.
I would like to see a return to agrarianism as a social revolution. I think we need to go smaller, and we need to go back to nature.
Connecting farms, food, health, and environment, Day 2 of the 2nd Virginia Food Security Summit, next on Meet the Farmer TV. Here we are at Alumni Hall, University of Virginia. To get us started, let's hear some opening remarks from the organizers of the 2nd Virginia Food Security Summit.
Welcome to the locavore capital of the world. And I get to say that because that's what Forbes magazine said in June about Charlottesville.
In order for all of this great information and great energy that you've demonstrated here last night and today to be successful, there has to be support from the broader community of people in Virginia. And that means not only the broader community of farmers, but the broader community of Virginia citizens.
At this particular point in time, there's no other place on the planet that has this collective energy that we have right here today. If we miss the high points of keeping our biodiversity through seeds, through land-raised breeds of livestock, we're all going to miss a point here. It's possible for the entire population on this planet Earth to go through famine again due to the fact that we've got genetic engineering of plants on such a large scale that it just takes one genetic viral fungus bacterium to come along and wipe out a huge percentage of the entire planet's food supply.
When we're thinking about farm to table, I think most people are thinking about a rural farm somewhere out in the country that's going to bring the food into the city where the people are. What Growing Power is showing us is that farm can be right in the center of the city. And I would encourage, many of you are doing some excellent work with urban horticulture, gardening. I think it's strong potential in Virginia for that to be not just home gardening, but also commercial production of crops in cities. Any places that the sun shines and we can get on a rooftop or in a vacant lot or in a parking lot with these above ground soil containment systems that are out these days, there's a strong potential for horticulture in the city.
How do we grow new farmers? It's a remarkable fact that in America we don't know the answer to that. And especially when we have such incredible parallels in our own lives with sports, so that we know it's a combination of public investment, private investment, collaboration, thinking in the long term for how do you actually grow people from very young to being mature stars. We don't necessarily want to have $123 million contracts for the celebrity chefs and farmers, but I think we can learn from our own experience in sports that we really have the capacity to do this if we get rid of the sense this is all going to be taken care of by the free market and say, let's plan for what we need and let's make it happen.
Now let's hear some highlights of the presentations, showcasing food system innovations, innovation in schools, health and food, innovations in food distribution, and innovation in food entrepreneurship and business.
Wanted to tell you a little bit about our Farm to School program in Harrisonburg. I don't want to make the assumption that everybody in the room knows exactly what Farm to School means. There's a couple different components. The first is trying to include healthy, locally grown or produced foods on school lunch menus. And then there's also the piece that involves nutrition education for students, which can be in the classroom by having farmers come in, school gardens, things like that. So it's not just food in school, it's also the education piece. I think we can make a tremendous economic impact with Farm to School, as well as really improving the nutrition for our students in Virginia.
The Food Hub opened our doors in 2009, so we've now been around for about 2.5 years. Thanks actually to a really passionate and motivated group of citizens who understood the need for this organization and knew how to get things done, which is awesome because there's a room of those people right here. I'm just going to give you a brief, really quick overview of what we do first, because I think it's really important to the distribution part of our organization. It's all really linked together, so I think it's important to understand all of the aspects of what we're working on. Our mission statement then and now is to strengthen and secure the future of a healthy regional food supply. We do that by providing small farmers with concrete services that support their economic vitality and promote stewardship of the land. What that actually translates into is 3 general categories of activities. These are the things that we do day to day to achieve our mission. We aggregate and distribute locally grown fruits, vegetables, meat, eggs, and value-added products to wholesale buyers. More on that in just a minute. We educate and empower farmers, large and small, old and new, beginning, established, aspiring, backyard gardeners, farmers, and we increase access to local food through our distribution partnerships.
Shiitake is a niche produce, and I started out by just doing it because I just felt like I had the energy. It was fun. I give, just handing mushrooms to people to taste and everything else. And then some chefs from the Inn at Little Washington and some other chefs discovered me, and after that they were asking me how to produce quantities. It took me about a year to come back with an answer because I was just having fun. I actually have the worst business model ever. I take my produce in the back of my car when I'm going to work, drive to Annapolis, dump about 50 pounds, and then drive back all the way to Vienna for work on a given morning. So, I kept reminding myself that there's a reward at the end. I love what I'm doing, and it's great.
So there you have it, food security for all. I'm your host, Michael Clark, for Meet the Farmer TV, from the farm to the plate. This program is a production of Meet the Farmer TV, LLC, in association with Planet Earth Diversified, Nelly Productions, and Leslie P. Jenkins Photography and Graphic Design. For additional information and extended versions of this program, visit our website, www.meetthefarmer.com.